this time we're going to take you to a place where we've never been before. We're going to take a look at permissions, both on premises with the likes of Windows, as well as the cloud with the likes of SharePoint. How do they work? And as always, what can they do for you? Greetings everyone, Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP, as well as a Microsoft Certified Trainer. Hey listen, if this is your first visit to my channel, you are so welcome, and I really appreciate your visit. All right, now this week I thought I'd do something that we've not really done before. I'm going to take a look at permissions, and I've had a number of requests recently for Andy, can you do a session on file permissions in Windows Server? And somebody else asked me, hey Andy, can you do a session on SharePoint permissions? And I thought, you know, maybe we could combine that, and we could look at the kind of the old and the current in terms of on-premises, and we could look at the cloud-based types of permissions in the cloud with SharePoint. Now, if you've not subscribed to my session, we love subscribers, so go ahead, click on that subscribe button, ring that bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff in the future. And at the end of the session, every week, you know, I do question time. So if you're one of the lucky people who submits a question, then it could be your question this week that I'm going to feature. So I think without any more jibber jabber, I think it's about time we get to the demos, don't you? So talking about permissions, our first port of call is for Windows. So this is how permissions work in Microsoft Windows, whether you're using the server product or whether you're using Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows XP. To be honest, the principles are the same. Now after this, we're going to take a look at cloud permissions and just have a look at how they differ in the likes of Microsoft 365 and in products like SharePoint and so on. So to kick things off here, I've got a very simple representation, and what we can see at the top is our C drive, so C:// and the backslash tells us that we have a folder called data. And within the folder called data, you can also have subfolders. So in this case, we have sales. And within the sales subfolder, I have a document called sales.doc. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here and I'm going to click on this arrow. Now, to understand how permissions work, the first thing that you need to understand is the concept of implicit permissions. So for example, if the permissions on here were full control, which includes read, write, change, and so on, that constitutes kind of full control. So any permissions that you set on the C drive will typically waterfall down to the next object. All right? So typically waterfall down. So whatever permissions were here now will be taken down into data and, to be honest, down into sales and so on. And this is referred to as implicit permissions. So if I click on here and I'll just call this, let's say, implicit. Okay. Now when we talk about implicit permissions, let's just increase that. Yeah. So when we talk about implicit permissions, I like to refer to it as the waterfall effect. So anything that happens at a higher level waterfalls downwards. So any permissions from the C drive implicitly waterfall here. Now, let's suppose we have a sales document here and you didn't want users to be able to write to it, and maybe perhaps it was read only. All right. So in this case, you want to set a permission on this particular folder, and this is essentially called an explicit permission. All right. So again, I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to click into here, and this is explicit. Okay. So it's an explicit permission, all right? And what that means is it essentially blocks the permissions from waterfalling down onto this particular document here. So just out of the box, let's take a look now at permissions in Windows. So here I am in File Explorer in Windows 11, and you can see I've got pretty much what I had in the graphic that I just showed you. So you can see I've got a folder, I've got my C drive here, so which is my hard drive on my computer. I've created a data folder, and within data I've got a subfolder called sales, and within here you can see I've got my document, which is a sales report. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the C drive here, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go into properties on here. And here you can see a number of things. Primarily what I'm looking at here is the security tab. Okay, now just to let you understand, you have a number of different types of permissions. All right, so for example, read and write are single permissions. Okay, read and write. Likewise, modify. So modify would be a combination of read and change. Yes, so you can read the file, but you can also edit it, but not necessarily delete the file. All right. Other things, read and execute. So for example, if it was a piece of software, you can read the application and you can execute it. You can run the command line. Full control, of course, is a combination of all of these things. So if you've got full control, you can do anything with that particular file. Now, you'll notice that we also have an advanced tab here as well. And if I go over to the advanced tab here, you can see it tells me the advanced security settings here. And you can see that by default, we've got, these are the default settings. So administrators have full control, whereas regular users will have read and execute. All right. Again, authenticated users. So if you're authenticated, you will have the rights to modify and so on. Now, bearing in mind that these permissions are a combination of different permissions, and just to show you that, if I click onto a permission here and then click onto edit, you can see that full control is a combination of these permissions. All right. So that's the first thing that I want to talk about. So the graphic that I just showed you, I also mentioned something called implicit and explicit permissions. And the way this works is I'm just going to come out of this. Now, just to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to come up to the view menu here. And again, you can view the icons in various different ways, of course. What I want to do is I want to come up here, and I want to you can view the file details if you want to. You can view the content, and again you might say, yeah, I want to show things like the file name extensions and any hidden items. So for example, system files are often hidden, and the reason why Microsoft does that is to avoid doing any damage to them. All right. So anyway, if I go back into my, let's say my sales folder here, and I'm going to right click, I'm going to go into the properties again and look at that. You can see that it's exactly the same properties and permissions. So you can see that this is waterfalling down, and this is a perfect example of an implicit permission. So with that in mind, what is an explicit permission? All right. Well, I've got a report here, and I'm going to go into this particular report, and I'm going to go into properties. And in the properties, again, I'm going to click on the security tab, and again, you'll see that same permissions waterfalling here. All right. So what I want to do is, do I want to change the permissions? I'm going to go ahead and click on edit here. And the first thing that I want to do is you might say, okay, users, again, that's fine, but I may also want to add a user. Okay, so I want to add an explicit permission. Now, as anybody knows me, I'm a big Trekkie, so I've got a user here called Kirk J, and I'm going to add in Captain Kirk. And look at that. When you, by default, when you add a user in, it gives a minimum level of permissions. Now, you'll notice here that we have two columns, allow permissions and deny permissions. So if I wanted to explicitly grant Captain Kirk full control, modify, which is read and change, read and execute, read, or just the write permission. So I'm going to say, I want Captain Kirk to have full control, all right? And I'm going to apply that, all right? So again, how does deny work? I'll come back to that in a second. But that, you can see, it's now explicitly put in Captain Kirk. So even though the users is still restricted, because that's water falling down, Captain Kirk now has the explicit permission of full control. And that's how implicit and explicit permissions work. Now, for the final piece of the puzzle here, I just want to right-click. I'm going back to properties of this document, and I'm clicking on that security tab again. Now, this is useful. You'll see that I've got the advanced tab here, and if I click onto that, you've got a number of different options. All right. So again, it shows you that you'll notice here, by the way, the explicit permission is always at the top of the list. All right. So it's always at the top. Likewise, any deny permissions would always at the top. Because it's faster processing, it doesn't have to go through the entire list. All right. Now, you'll notice here at the bottom, I have a button that says Disable Inheritance. And what that does is it completely blocks permissions from water falling down. So any permissions set here are just water falling down. Now, if you don't want that, and you want to have just explicit permissions, you can remove that and it will convert inherited permissions to explicit permissions. So these are now explicit permissions, all right? So now, again, I could say, I don't want regular users to have any kind of access here, all right? I just want administrators and Captain Kirk. Now, again, I could enable inheritance again, and it would then bring those settings back. So again, you could see now that those original settings have come back, but it doesn't change the fact that I've got explicit permissions. Okay. Now, the only other issue here, and I'm often asked the question, Andy, what would happen if the user is a member of a group? Well, in that case, permissions are cumulative. So, for example, if you were a user and you had read permission and you were a member of a group that had, let's say, full control, then you would have full control because permissions are cumulative. The only exception to that rule is, let's say you've got full control, but you're a member of the sales team and the sales team is denied, then your overriding permission would be deny, okay? Because the most restrictive permission, when you combine groups, the most restrictive permission is the most effective permission. Now, for the final part of the puzzle here, I'm going to right-click this folder and I'm going to go into Properties. And in the folder properties here, you'll notice you've got a couple of things. You can share this folder out. So if you had a small network or a group of people that you wanted to share this folder out, it's really simple to do that. I can simply just share, and I can say, who do I want to share this folder with? I can share it, let's say, with the sales group. And you can see that it's two little faces here. It's the sales group. And again, I can choose the share permission. So am I going to give read and write permission, or am I going to give read permission? Just a word of warning here. If you've set NTFS permissions, which is the file system permissions that I just showed you, and let's say you had a permission of read and change, and you then did a share permission of read, then this would be the most restrictive permission. Therefore, it would be the main permission. You understand? So whatever the most restrictive permission is would become the dominant permission here. So just be aware of that. All right. Again, I could then go ahead and share that folder out. The last thing I just want to mention here is if I go into the security tab, this is quite useful. In the advanced tab here, we have a couple of sheet tabs here. So for example, if you want to do any kind of auditing, if you want to audit access, for example, find out who's accessing, who's not being able to access something, that can be quite useful. But this is also really useful as well, effective access. So you can basically go in and select a user. So in this case, I can go in and say, yeah, my Captain Kirk character here. And if I click OK, I can then say, okay, assuming that Captain Kirk logs in, what would potentially happen? Okay, is he a member of any groups or anything like that? And I can then say, hey, okay, if he's a member of this group or this user and he logged on at this device, then what would happen? So you can then view his effective access, and it would show you, based on the current levels of permissions, what permissions he would have access to. So effective permissions or effective access is a really useful tool. So those are your traditional kind of file side permissions that you're likely to get on Windows Server, Windows 10, Windows 11, and in fact, all versions of Windows. The names may change slightly, but essentially it's the same stuff. Now, what about life in the cloud? So you're moving at the moment, many of us are moving to the cloud. We're moving or migrating content over. So how do permissions work in the likes of SharePoint, for example? Well, I thought I would take a little bit of time and let's just have a quick look at those as well. So here we are in a website, and this is my site. It's called Oslo Sales. Now, really, when we talk about permissions, there's really kind of two ways to think about permissions, admin permissions and user permissions. All right. So you can see here, I'm in my standard website, and because I'm an administrator, I can manage my permissions in a number of ways. I can come over to here and I've got members here. So I've got my member permissions here. And you can see I've got a number of users. I've got Alex and Alan. I've got Christy. I've got Adele. And here's me. I'm the owner of this particular site. So if I come up to Alan here, you can see really here there's only two kind of sets of settings that we've got. You can either have a member, or you can have an owner, right? And that's pretty much what you can do just in terms of the group membership. Now, what else can we do with this? Well, I can say, right, well, what about kind of admin permissions? So for this, I'm going to go into the SharePoint Admin Center. And you can see I've selected the website here. And if I click onto the tab here, you can see that I have a permissions tab. And let's have a look at this. So likewise, this is where an administrator can, for example, a group owner or a team owner, and you can see that I can manage that. I can change that if I want to. I can also add in additional administrators. But underneath here, instead of having features like read and write and change, the way that we now think about permissions are role-based. So based on your role, it will include a specific set of permissions. So for example, site owners essentially have full control, whereas a site member, they can add, remove, change, and so on, but not necessarily delete. But site visitors, again, these guys are going to have really quite minimal sets of permissions. All right. So with that in mind, let's take a quick look at that. So I'm going to go into the website, and I'm actually going to open this website up, and I've got it here. Now, what we see here is just this is called a modern website. So the idea is it's super simple to work with and super easy. But you can see over here that I've got a little gear icon. So I'm going to go into the gear icon, and I can, as you can see, it says site permissions. So if I go into the site permissions here, again, you get that same option that we had earlier. So I can go in and you can see the site members. I can see if I've got any site visitors. But the difference this time is you'll notice that I have a little edit button here. And again, I can click on the drop down arrow and I can say, I just want, for example, certain users to have read permission, certain users to have full control, which is essentially admin permission. And at this point, you can also remove permissions as well. Now, again, in terms of site sharing, the site sharing tab here, again, you can see who are you going to allow to share the content. So at the moment, it defaults to owners, but you can say, yes, owners and members, and then you can say, no, only site owners can share files. So this is in terms of sharing permissions. Now, another thing that you can do is you can allow access requests. This is really cool, actually. So somebody can request access to a resource, and that request comes in, and the request goes to the owner, and you can then approve that. All right. So the sharing settings are really, really useful here. So as I said, you've got guest sharing. And the other thing that we can also do is if you're going to allow guests, and by the way, if you've not had a chance to look at some of my guest access videos on YouTube, definitely take a look at those because it really explains this area. But this is very cool. So you can also do guest expiration as well. So if you've got any expiry dates on a particular website, then you can, this would then appear here. All right. And I'm going to cover that actually in a different session as well. So again, site permissions here, you can go in, you can add users, you can change the roles and so on. So in terms of permissions, it's slightly different. It's a different way of thinking about the kinds of traditional file permissions as opposed to the modern way of assigning users and permissions. So the last thing that I want to show you, I'm going to come into SharePoint Admin Center here. And this is my SharePoint tenant, of course. And I've got my Oslo HQ. I've got my Oslo sales here. So I'm going to go into Oslo sales and bring up the properties here. Now, If I go into policies, well, first of all, if I go into permissions, it's pretty much just as you just saw. You see there's no site visitors and there's no members and things like that. What I want to do is I'm going to click into policies, and I can go into external sharing policies on this site. And again, I've covered external sharing and guest sharing in a previous video, so I'll put the links below, and if you want to go ahead and look at those sessions, please do so. But you can see here, are you going to allow external guests? So yes, new and external guests, because this website is actually a Microsoft team as well. Now, assuming that you're going to invite guests, one of the things that you can do is, this is really useful, you can actually do an expiry of guest access. So it can be the same as the organization. So if you've done an expiry policy, you can just use the same thing automatically, or you can override it here. And you can say, I'm going to have it for 30 days. So any guest access will expire within 30 days. And again, you've also got things like default sharing link type and sharing permission. Do you want folks to view or edit and so on? So now if I click on to save here, and if I go back into permissions, and if I scroll down, my site, in fact, if I just come out of that and go back in, you can now see that our information, you can see the policies, it was last updated here. And again, you can now see that we have got guest permissions. So the guest permissions are in. And again, we're now also allowing temporary access. So, the site would expire within 30 days. The other thing that you can also do, one of the benefits, the real benefits of 365, of course, is security. And if you're using sensitivity labels, again, at the moment, I'm not using sensitivity labels here, but if you wanted sensitivity labels like confidential, you could actually highlight that here. And I'm going to cover that, actually, all that additional sensitivity labels with SharePoint. I'm going to cover that in a future session. So there you have it, just a little bit about sharing the sites and also managing the different levels of access and how they compare to the likes of file permissions. Well, it's that time again. It's question time. Alrighty then, let's have a look. Well, I've just got a couple of questions, and I get lots of nice comments and I really do appreciate it. I've just picked out a couple. So somebody's saying here, Capadala, I hope I pronounced that right. Hey Andy, good stuff. I'm new to this environment and keen to learn on SharePoint. Where do I start? That's a great question. All right. So the best place to start on SharePoint, I believe, create a trial Microsoft 365 account for yourself. You get 30-day trial. And once you've created the trial, create a few test users in that tenant. And then what you can do is open up SharePoint and just have a go at creating some sites. In terms of documentation, docs.microsoft.com is a fantastic resource to get started. And again, a number of my SharePoint videos have gone in through step by step to give you hopefully some knowledge on that. All right, so hopefully that helps. Slightly related question. This one comes from South Africa. Macadeli, I hope I said that right. Hi Andy. 2 companies on an E3 tenant. One company is finance, 200 users out of 3,000. And basically you're looking to migrate to the destination tenant. Yes, you can do that. You know what? I actually did a session. If you check out my videos, there was a session I did on migration. But I'm going to actually, there's been so many changes in migration. You've given me an idea for a tenant migration. The key thing to note, by the way, is if you want to do a migration, again, I'm just going to bring up this tenant here so you can see it. Places to do migrations, 2 places really. You can come into SharePoint here, and we have a migration tab. And literally, you can pull across things like file shares here. And what this does, it installs an agent on a local server on your network. And you can then just basically start pulling content across. Another tool that you can use, which absolutely rocks, by the way, if you've got on-premises, you can pull out SharePoint content, but also for cloud environments. And I did a session on this, check it out. It's called Mover, and basically it does exactly as it says on the tin. It moves your content from one environment to another. So there is a video on that on my channel. So again, go ahead and check that out. Now, the other thing that you can also look at here is if I go into, let's say, the likes of Microsoft Exchange. So here in Microsoft Exchange, you're talking about migrating content from one organization to another. Again, we have a migration tab here, and it talks about, what kind of migration do you want to do? So you can do, there's different types of migration. First of all, do you want to migrate in? Give the job a name. So let's say batch 1. And then really it's talking about the different types of migration. So a remote move migration is essentially called a hybrid migration. Then you've got things like a cutover and stage migration. These basically mean that you've already got an Exchange environment and you're migrating the content across and then essentially just cutting the cable once it's done. So you then throw away that old server. But with a hybrid migration, I mean, certainly if you've got 3,000 users, you probably want some kind of coexistence in place. All right. Now, we also have a feature, very cool feature here called the cross-tenant migration. And this does exactly as it says on the tin. So this helps you migrate content from one Azure tenant to another. And I really think that this could be your solution. But again, you've given me an idea for a future session. So check that out. I may do something about that in the not too distant future. So there you have it, the best of both worlds: on-premises, Windows permissions, cloud-based SharePoint permissions. Hopefully you're a little bit wiser, and thanks very much to the folks who requested that session. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, bump the like button. It really makes a difference. And if you've not subscribed, then go ahead, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff in the future. And as always, I love your comments, your questions, and your feedback. So thanks very much for visiting, and I hope you enjoyed the session. I'll see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button, and you won't miss out.